Before we get to today's Gemara, just share something on yesterday's Gemara from the Rebbe. This has been our custom lately. Sharing when we find something from the Rebbe on the Gemara, we share it. So the Rebbe spoke in 19 Toshin Chafalef, that's 71. No, 61. They were talking about Gedol Lagima, this Gemara. And yesterday the Gemara said that the great is feeding or eating with other people, that it brings people close together, and the lack thereof distances people. And the distancing of those who are close was referenced to by Ammon and Moav, right? The nations of Ammon and Moav who met the Jews in the desert did not give provisions to the Jews, and thus they were told, can't marry into the Jewish people. So even those who are close, because Ammon and Moav are descendants of Lot, Lot of course is Avram's nephew, making the Jews nation cousins, if you will, and yet they were pushed away because they didn't feed properly. So the Rebbe is speaking here in Parshas Lech Lecha, and Rebbe is connecting it to this Gemara. Parshas Lech Lecha is really the beginning of the story. Before even Lot is with his daughters producing Ammon and Moav, what leads to that really is the fact that Lot and Avraham split up. Lot and Avraham were living together. Had to live together, there would have been no need. There would have been none of the story. There would have been no need for Lot to go down to Sodom, no need to save him from Sodom, and therefore no need for his children to do that with him. They only did that because the Sodom was destroyed. So the separation between these two relatives begins even before Ammon and Moav are created by Lot, by their shared common ancestor separating from Avram. They will quote the pasuk in Mishlei, which says, "Poiter mayim reishis madim," which means not drinking water together is the beginning of strife. That is to say, whenever there's separation amongst people, here it's between a Jew and a non-Jew, certainly amongst Jews, it's got to be nipped in the bud right away. Right at the beginning, there's poiter mayim, they're only not sharing a glass of water, and all of a sudden, the strife begins. Got to cut it right there before it goes farther and farther. And then it pushes this even further and says, what's interesting is that when Lot separated from Avram, there was actually a positive element to it. Rashi comments right there that because Lot left, now the Shekhinah came to him. That means the presence of Hashem was not presence of Hashem, Shekhinah, the presence of Hashem was not communicating with Avram so long as Lot was there. So the same separation that the Gemara says as a negative thing, as in we're pushing away Ammon and Moav, descendants of Lot, that same separation has a positive element, as it were. So how does this work? Meaning seemingly the separation seems to be a good thing. The fact that Lot is leaving Avram, now God is communicating to Avram. And yet here we're saying, Gedol Lagima, the feeding or the bringing together of Ammon and Moav would have been a better thing. Had Ammon and Moav fed the Jews, they would have been able to marry in and bring them closer. And therefore, for that reason, Rebbe notes the language Gedola, great, and Rebbe cites to a number of sources in Chassidus that the word Gedola, which means great is feeding, great is swallowing, Lagima, great is sharing food, that brings people close. The number of places in Chassidus were explained that Gedola, as opposed to Katan, small, means that which transcends the divine system. Seder Shtalshlos, as it's known in Chassidus. Seder Shtalshlos would mean the divine system of worlds, where a diminutive, finite divine energy is invested in one lofty world, which then descends to another lofty world, till finally makes into our world. So when you're looking at that system, then indeed, Hashem's communication to this world would have been better if light separates. But Gedola Lagima, the bringing together of people through literally eating, reaches to a level of transcendence. Which means this Gedola Lagima, the fact that people are together, how much more so Jews are together, because we're here talking about Ammon and Moav, Jews and non-Jews. How much more so when Jews are together, transcend even communication from Hashem to Avram. The Rebbe doesn't say this clearly, but it's very much connected to that famous Gemara about Abraham stopping to speak to Hashem, to greet guests, to welcome guests. Very similar idea. Communication to Hashem is a nice thing, meaning keeping light away and getting communication from Hashem is the loftiest level you can get within the divine system. You want to transcend that? Unity. Unity coming through literally eating amongst Jews and non-Jews, and certainly amongst Jews. All this to say how important it is that even period mayim, it's right at the beginning of strife. There's just, we're not drinking water together. Right away sit down for a farbrengen, speak, literally eat food together. take care of that right away. Gedolei Gima, the power of people breaking bread together and eating and sharing. Even eat. Chassidish Farbrengen, one of the objectives of a Farbrengen, of Jews coming together to share l'chaim and eat something, is the fact that they share words of Torah and inspire each other is step 2. Step 1 is Gedolei Gima, just the fact that Jews are sitting together and singing a niggun together, just sitting and eating together, sharing food. That already nips in the bud the strife that could. They're drinking water, like they're missing water, like the Gemara, like the pasuk in Mishlei says. They're just not sharing a glass of water together. It's not. But that's the beginning of a road that goes to who knows where. So the importance of shared farbrengens, and then how much more so when it's added with words of Torah, etc.
Remember the greatest impression when we were in the shopping center. I was starting to come, and I couldn't believe all the food that came out of that little room in the back.
Yeah, the kitchen. Yeah.
It made such an impression, that it stayed with me. It was miraculous, in a sense.
Which room? In the old shop?
In the in the shopping
in the
center.
Shop. I see what you mean.
The kitchen was like this tiny room in the back, and the
like
food that came pouring out of there to feed everybody.
Yeah, I have to also add that anybody who's done this knows this, that the Avos Yisrael felt that a farbrengen by the oil is unparalleled to any other farbrengen. It's just a fact of life for anybody who's experienced it.
I've experienced it.
If you've experienced it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So you could sit by farbrengen here and enjoy l'chaim and share words, but the Avos Yisrael, it's palpable. The palpable feeling of connectedness between Yidden when you're sitting by farbrengen at the oil is unparalleled.
The last Farbrengen, his son-in-law and I we were the last men standing.
Yeah.
That was pretty cool.
Sitting.
We're sitting. So we can do a little plug. We're doing a trip to the oil, God willing. Hope everybody's coming for Yud Shvat. It's going to be a big community trip. Okay, it's number 1. Number 2, of course, you heard earlier, today's Chavdal Tevis, Dal Tevis Yartzeit. And since we're sitting here at a table of learning, I'll share 3 items related to learning to us practically, to some degree, from the Alter Rebbe. Number 1, the Alter Rebbe famously said once, "B'darf leben mit der Zeit," one has to live with the times. And the Chassidim, when they heard this, were baffled. What does this mean, live with the times? Live with the times meant read the newspaper. And surely the Alter Rebbe does not mean that. That the Chassidim have to live with the news in the newspaper. Until the Alter Rebbe's brother, the Maharil, explained, it means that living with times means living with the Parsha of the week. And that later became, by the previous Rebbe, when he established a system of chitas. Chitas is a word which means fear, fright. It's a word from the Chumash, but it's an acronym, Ches, Tuf, Chumash, Tehillim, Tanya. The previous Rebbe set up, based on that statement from the Alter Rebbe, that one should learn every day the Parsha of Chumash and Rashi from that day, right? On Sunday, do Risha in the first reading, and then Monday, second reading, etc. And like the Rebbe would say all the time, it's Davar HaShavah L'chol Nefesh. This is something that's anybody can do, especially today when everything's available in English. Number 1. Number 2, part of that chitas, the other tough, let's tell him, and then there's Tanya, learning the daily study of Tanya, which is written by the Alter Rebbe. And number 3, since we're learning Gemara, the Alter Rebbe established a chalukas hashas, which means every year, from Yutas Kislev to Yutas Kislev, they divided all of the Gemara, and each chassid would take 1 tractate. Actually, initially it was community. Each community should divide the entire Gemara. Each chassid should take 1 or 2 tractates to be finished by next year Yutas Kislev. And it was as if each chassid finishes the entire shas midin arvos. Right? There's the law of arvos, which means every Jew is responsible for the other. And it's explained in halacha. The simple law is talking about a guarantor. When I guarantee that I'm going to pay back somebody else's loan, so there's different levels of to what degree am I invested in that loan. And at the highest level, what it means is it's as if I borrowed the money, even though I don't have the money. But because I signed that I would guarantee the loan, it's not as if you would get the loan and I'm paying it back. But rather, the law of arvos, that all Jews are interconnected, so it's as if I took the loan. And therefore, if I'm taking upon myself to learn 1 tractate, and the reason why I'm doing that is on condition, as it were, that other Jews are taking the rest of them, it's as if I have a share in all the rest of the tractates. So it's as if, there's unity amongst Jews through the learning, and that each chassid is learning his own Masechta, but together. And this is something that still goes on until today. And since today's Dal Tevis Yartzeit, actually there was a time, initially it was set up that you go from Yutas Kislev to Yutas Kislev. But then, because chassidim were so busy on Yutas Kislev, that's what it says, they were busy with their avodah, whatever that avodah is, so they postponed this setting this splitting, this chalukah, this division of the Gemara, they postponed it to a few weeks later to Chav Dal Teves, to the Alter Rebbe's yahrzeit, when they were less busy than Yutas Kislev. But the Rebbe brought it back to Yutas Kislev. We're not as busy anymore. Okay, those are some introductory remarks. Now we can get to our Gemara. We're Kuv Dal Madalef 104b, 104a. I'm sorry. The line begins with the word V'shloishes, Banav, and the third word is Mipnei Ma. It's about a quarter from the top of the page. Mipnei Ma. Okay, so we listed the Mishnah. This is all predicated on the Mishnah, which listed 3 kings who have no share in the world to come: Yeravam, Menashe, and no, Achaz is not on the list.
It was killed, didn't it? They killed the
Achav, right? No, because Mor's asking Mipnei Ma le'manu Achaz. Sorry? Achav, yes, not Achaz.
No, Achav.
Yeah, so it's Menashe, Yeravam, and Achav on the list
Balance, but once he killed Nav,
of 3 kings that don't have their share in the world to come. We discussed each one at length. And in discussing each one of those at length, a number of other kings came up, including Achaz. And now the Gemara is going to ask, why is it that those 3 kings were selected, and other kings whom the scripture describes at length, their bad behavior, why are they not on the list of people who lost their share in the world to come? That's what the Gemara is going to do now. So what we're going to learn essentially is certain merits that are great enough that to allow for one to enter the world to come, notwithstanding the fact of their negative behavior. It doesn't mean they're not going to get their thing, but it means that they don't lose their share in the world to come. Okay. Says the Gemara, Pnei Manu is Achaz. Why is Achaz not listed amongst the people who lost their share in the world to come? Notwithstanding the fact that the scripture describes at length his bad behavior. So Rabbi Bar Abba said, because he is situated between 2 tzaddikim, his father, Ben Yosem, his father, Yotam, and his son, Lechizkiyo. Father righteous, son righteous. So notwithstanding the fact that he was a misbehaving king, the merit of his father and son protected him, and therefore he didn't completely lose his share in the world to come. Okay, and that's not something you can do about it. That you can do about it. Either you're born for that or you're not born for that. So there's nothing much we can do there other than the fact that on the other end, if you're a father or a son, which we all are, either father or son or both, you have the ability to protect one or the other. But in terms of yourself, it doesn't tell you much. Either your parents are or not. But the next statement teaches us quite a bit. Rav Yosef says, Rabbi Yirmiyah, son of Abba, said it was because he was born lucky enough between 2 tzaddikim. Rav Yosef says, because he was embarrassed in the presence of the prophet Yeshayahu, which means he still felt guilty about his behavior. And therefore when he was faced with the tzaddik, when he was faced with the prophet, he was embarrassed. In what way? Shinimar, the pasuk reads, Vayomer Hashem leYeshayahu, God tells the prophet Yeshayahu, say no lakras Achaz, go out and meet Achaz. Ata v'shar yishubanecha, you and the rest of the people living in that area, I guess, or
I think that was his name.
oh, sorry, Yoshev was one of the people. It's his son. Shar Yoshev bincha, Shar Yoshev your son. Go el ktsei talas habercha el yaina. Go to the edge of the top of the pool, or like the aqueduct. El mislas sada krevis, at the pathway of the field of the launderer. So the simple reading of the verses, it's just a location. There's an aqueduct. There's a higher aqueduct located at the edge of a field or of a path next to a field, which belonged to a krevis, to one who was a launderer, not a money launderer, just a guy who ran a laundromat. Yeah. So that's what the location is. Go meet him there. That's literally the meaning. But the Gemara asks, my krevis, what's the? It could have not said the word krevis. It could have not told us that the field belonged to someone who has a laundromat, and we would have known the information without it. Why is it so important to tell us that there's a laundromat? So there has to be some sort of allusion. There's got to be some sort of hidden message. And therefore the Gemara says like this. Ikadamri, some say, the kavshinu l'apa, he covered his face. The word krevis, he stretched it a bit, and you change the word samach, the letter samach for a sin, which is not uncommon, especially when you go from Hebrew to Aramaic, but even within Hebrew and within Aramaic, it's not uncommon to switch the sin for a samach. So the word kavis can be meaning kavis, to cover oneself. So he covered himself because he was embarrassed. V'cholaf, and Yeshayahu walked by. When he saw Yeshayahu coming, he was so embarrassed he covered his face. V'ikadamri, and others say, similarly but actually more explicit. He took a laundromat's basket and put it over his head in embarrassment and for Yeshayahu to walk by.
You wouldn't see him, but Rashi puts it more humorous. It was actually wet, so the water was coming down on him, and he was so.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's what I was going to share. So that's the Gemara. So first of all, just on a very simple level, here you have this lesson that we have the famous statement, Rishoyim Aleim Charatas, Mishtoyim Rishoyim Aleim Charata. The wicked are full of regret. And the Alter Rebbe in chapter 11 in Tanya, where he describes the wicked, he says the fact that the fact that this wicked one has regrets, even though he doesn't act on them, doesn't actually do teshuvah, that itself means he's not a complete rasha, because there's some part of him that still feels like he's misbehaving, which means even when he's doing a sin somewhere deep down, like the Alter writes, even during the sin, there's some part of him that didn't want to be there. So that itself is enough to prevent him from completely losing his share in the world to come. It's just on the simple reading, it teaches you that idea. Then you can go a little more here. So the way in which the pasuk and the Gemara alludes to his guilt, if you will, is through kaivis, through a laundromat. A laundromat, of course, doesn't clean. It's not there could have been someone, a Borsky, someone who has not a Borsky, not a tanner. It could have been someone who has a bathhouse. What's it called?
No.
A
bowen.
Sorry?
A bowen, a bath keeper.
In Aramaic, it's called a. Anyway, it could have been someone who owns a bathhouse. It would have been a more appropriate metaphor. Someone who's actually washing bodies. Why washing clothing?
Work.
No. Levushim. In Chassidus, what does it say? Levushim are? The garments are what? That the Abeinani, as we learned in Tanya, is not responsible, at least to some degree, and he's not expected to be successful. In completely overworking his emotion and his feelings. The fact that he has negative desires, is not something he's responsible for. He's created that way. But what is he responsible for? For the external manifestation of those things. Namely, thinking about them, speaking about them, and acting on them. And those, Chassidus say, are the lavushim, are the garments. Just like garments are that which present me. So the thought, speech, and action present what I'm feeling. And that I am responsible for. So even if I feel like I want to do something, I can control myself and not say it. I can control myself and not do it. Or even if I don't feel like doing something, I can push myself and do it. Right? So the kaivis, the guilt, as it were, is supposed to, or should, wash. And then take Miyashi's words, where it actually drips down and washes, should wash at least his behavior, at least his levushim, at least the clothing, at least the laundromat, at least cleaning. His behavior should change, even if he doesn't change his internal feelings towards those behaviors. Perhaps that's being alluded to here.
Also purification in general. It says when you go to mikvah, you wash your...
That's what I was saying, that it could have been purification from someone who owns a bathhouse. That would have been purification of the body, but it's specifically purification of clothing. So I'm saying clothing is action versus what you're more responsible for. Clothing,
because he didn't change
parallel.
Hashem didn't expect him to change so much. Even the external would have been enough.
That's correct. Even if you change behavior, that's enough.
The
fact that a person wants to do Averis, nothing you can do about that. But doing them, that's a very different story. That's something one can control. Okay, so further now. Why is Ammon not listed on the list of kings who should lose their share in the world to come? Also, Scripture is at length describes his misbehavior. So it says the Gemara, Pnei Kvoidei Shel Yeshayahu. Because out of respect to Ammon's son, Yeshayahu was a good king. So the Gemara asks, 1 second. Before you mentioned, when you said the reason why Achaz is not on the list because his father and son were righteous kings. Here it's just son. Amnon is not on the list because his son Yeshayahu is a good king. So then anybody who has a son who's a good king also shouldn't be on the list of people who lose their share in the world to come. And if the Gemara asks, Menashe nami lo nimni. Menashe shouldn't either be in the list. Menashe is one of the... sorry.
Yeah, that's right.
It's Chizkiyahu is his father.
Yeah.
Let me rephrase the question. Now, if you say it has to be both, that's one thing. But now that you're saying only a son is enough, the Gemara is assuming that only a father is also enough to protect somebody. Okay? And if the Gemara asks, Menashe shouldn't be on the list either. Menashe is one of the kings who are on the list of people, on the list of those who lose their share in the world to come. And the Gemara asks, Menashe nami lo nimni, Menashe should also not be on the list. Mipnei kvodo Chizkiyahu, out of respect for the king Chizkiyahu, Menashe's father, whom we mentioned way earlier, could have been Mashiach. That's how great he was. So the Gemara answers, Bra mizaki abba, a son can redeem and give merit to his father. Abba lo mizaki bra. A father cannot give merit, transfer merit to his children. It's quite hard, quite heavy. I guess the simple reading is, a person's child comes from them. And therefore, the good that the child does, at least in some part, the father bears responsibility and therefore gets merit of the good that the child does. But the reverse doesn't really work. A child, or if
The child does good.
a father is doing well, it doesn't. Sorry?
If the child does good, then the father can't get merit.
No, the reverse.
The other way
If the
around.
child does good, the father does get merit.
Yeah.
Because whatever he's doing, in some way I'm responsible for what he did. But if I'm doing well, it doesn't transfer automatically to my child.
It doesn't go downwards, it goes upwards.
Right?
You say Kaddish, it's the child.
That's right.
That's right. In other words, yeah, exactly. The son just Kaddish for, well,
That goes both ways.
unfortunately it happens both ways as well.
The
But
original Takana was right, was really for a son to a father.
Yeah.
It was extended from his father to a son. The original Takana was his son to a father. That was the main Kaddish. And we sent to all the relatives.
So Menashe is
Hey,
not mentioned.
Sorry?
Menashe is not.
No, so therefore Menashe is on the list of the people who lose their share in the world to come because his father being king is not good enough.
Didn't help him. He has
His father being a good king is not good enough. If his son was a good king, it would have helped.
Yeah.
But his father being a good king is not. Meaning to say, I guess it means to say, also like a person can be the biggest tzaddik in the world, but if he doesn't invest in education, it's not transferring. So if his son did well, then you know that the father did something good in the education. But just because the guy's a tzaddik and the father's a great guy doesn't mean doesn't guarantee this child's going to be a good person unless he's investing in transferring that goodness. Yeah. The Ksiv in the verse reads, the Gemara cites a verse to prove that a father doesn't automatically confer merit on the child unless he invests and the child actually produces. This is
Hazin, yeah. Parsha Hazin, Vein Miyadi, Matzil.
Yeah. If ein miyadi matzil, there's no one from my hand who can save me. In miyadi matzil, there's no hand that can save me, kind of. So says-
Hashem's control.
Yeah.
Unless
So says the Gemara, this is a reference to ein Avram matzil Yishmael. Avram, as great as he was, doesn't automatically mean that Yishmael is going to do well. Ein Yitzchak matzil is Esav. Yitzchak could be as great as he is. It doesn't automatically mean that Esav is going to do well. And therefore, this indicates that father's merit doesn't automatically transfer to the child. But a child's merit means that the father bears some responsibility for that and therefore gets some of the merit. And therefore Menashe is not protected by the fact that his father was Chizkiyahu. But, who was it? Amnon.
Had a son, Yeshayahu.
That's right. Amnon had a son Yeshayahu, and therefore he is saved.
He get-
Even therefore he doesn't lose his share in the world to come. Okay. Says the Gemara Hashdal Sislachi. Now, since we got to this point, and we've come to the conclusion that a child does confer merit to his father, so Achaz as well, the king who mentioned earlier, who he said
Had both.
had both, he had both father and son. And the other version was he was embarrassed. Nami loy imni, he's also not listed. He doesn't need the fact that his father was tzaddik and his son was a righteous one. Just the fact that his son was enough, which is Chizkiyahu, and therefore doesn't need the merit, or not doesn't need the merit. His father doesn't help him, and therefore it's only really the fact that his son was Chizkiyahu that protected him, not that his father was Yatim. Okay. One more king And here's quite a story, which I haven't come to any full understanding of what the spiritual meaning of the story means, but clearly there is some spiritual meaning, and but I'll read the story as is, and the floor is open. You can think about it. Maybe tomorrow we'll come with something. It says the Gemara, why was Yehoiakim not counted as one of the kings who lost their share in the world to come, even though Scripture describes at length how bad his behavior was? It says the Gemara, Mishum Rabbi Chia bar Avoy, because of Rabbi Chia, son of Avoy. Damar Rabbi Chia bar Avoy, Rabbi Chia bar Avoy said, Ksiv, the verse reads, Al Gugulusoi Shal Yehoiakim, because it's written on the skull, literally in the skull of Yehoiakim, this king. It was written Zois Void Acheres, this and another, as if to say this, the fact of the way he is right now as a skull, as we'll learn in the story, plus another thing that's going to happen to him, is already enough to save him from the world to come. Enough to prevent him from completely losing his share in the world to come. Okay, so what happened with the skull, and why is it saying this and something else? Says the Gemara, Zekina Rabbi Preda, the grandfather of Rabbi Preda, Ashkel Gogolusa, he found a skull that was hanging out, that was lying at the gates of Jerusalem. And he sees that on the skull it's written, this and another. Meaning the fact that his body is being so disrespected, that his skull is hanging on the gates of Jerusalem as opposed to being buried properly, that plus something else is atoning for him. So what's the something else? So
and that's written
on the skull
itself?
On the skull itself. So I said, I'm telling the story literally, but there's a spiritual layer here, and the floor is open. But this is the story literally. On the skull, that's what's written.
The words Zois Void.
Zois Void Acheres. Those three words. This and something else. So the fact that the skull is lying here, that's already bad enough punishment. And then there's something else coming. What's something else? So first, the grandfather prayed that didn't know what it was. So Kavra, he tried to bury it. He sees a skull, the Jewish skull. He figured, tries to bury it. But it wouldn't stick. It wouldn't stay buried. It wouldn't stay underground. Kavra buried it again. And it wouldn't get buried. Omar, so Rabbi Preda's grandfather said, this must be the skull of the king Yehoiakim. Why? Because the verse reads of him, that this Yehoiakim is going to get the burial of a donkey, and it'll be buried, cast out of Jerusalem. The verse describes, in negative terms, Yehoiakim's burial. So I said, okay, if this skull is not being buried, it must be this guy Yehoiakim's burial, of which the verse says that his burial is going to be
like that of a donkey,
and disrespected, not in Yerushalayim, right? Because he's at the gates of Jerusalem, and the pasuk says it's going to be outside of Yerushalayim. So what's he going to do now? Amar, he said to himself, Malko, this is a king. It's not appropriate that it should be discarded like this, notwithstanding his misbehavior. He's still a king, and even the Gemara earlier discussed why each one of the people who lost their share in the world to come, the Gemara still discussed why they merit to be king, which means being king means that there's something virtuous there, something, even with bad behavior. So if he's a king, he's got to be respected. So Karcha Beshira, he wrapped it in silk, and he put it into a box. He went home. His wife sees it, a skull in a box wrapped in silk, being treated so nicely. Savra,
he took the box home?
Took the box home.
Obviously.
Took the box home.
He took the skull home and put it in a box in his home.
Or maybe it doesn't say he put it. It doesn't say where he put it. He could have put it before. Anyway,
But in a box in his house. Yeah.
In his house.
there's a skull in silk and a box in his house.
Yeah.
His wife sees it.
I hope it wasn't his anniversary.
That's
Close.
Yeah, close.
So
You're on the right
yeah.
track,
So Savraha. So she thought the Itza Kamai Sahava. This must be his first wife.
Yeah, he couldn't-
The Loi Kamanashila. And he couldn't let go of her.
Yeah.
So she's jealous.
Sure.
What is this? So Shagra Tanura, she lit up the oven, Vakalsa, and singed it. Incinerated it. Hainu Diksiv, this is the meaning of what it said on the skull. Zois, this, the fact that the skull found in the streets of Jerusalem. And another thing, the fact that it's not going to be even buried properly, it's going to be burned and all of this is that all that suffering, that all that embarrassment that Yaakov went through, is what prevented him from completely losing his share in the world to come. So this is the story. Again, the floor is open. You got to think about what this means. But I can say this for now. What this means is, the halacha is that a person, of course, burial is a high priority, and we don't. We try our best not to touch the body, to do anything to the body,
To disturb the body.
to disturb the body.
Desecrated.
But yet here, the desecration of the body served as a cleansing for him. So it's quite an interesting. It's a semi-conflict, not a conflict. Let me rephrase that. This story has no bearing on halacha, on Jewish law. It's a story in the Gemara, and it's in the Chelek of Drush. It's in the part of Drush. It's the part of Torah which is homiletic. So, assuming the story is literal, it still doesn't have halachic bearing. And the halacha is that a person should treat the body. But nonetheless, post factum, the fact that there are Jews who unfortunately have gone through such a thing and didn't get the proper burial they deserve, we can hope that in the same way served as a atonement for Yaakov, that at least post factum, before it starts, obviously do your best to try to prevent desecration of the body. But post factum, if it so happened, let's say that it was an atonement. And I can think of a few Jews who were went up in ashes that served at the greatest atonement possible. About 6 million of them I can think of. All right, have a wonderful day, everybody.
So at the end, he got Olam Haba.
Yeah, eventually. After all that, which gets to your point, by the way. See, even though he was a bad king, so why is he getting share in the world to come? Only after he got through all this desecration. It's not like he went straight to the top. Only after through
He
all.
got his punishment. But still.
So obviously, whoever else had to get the punishment before they get to the world to come. Losing your share in the world to come is like the most egregious thing that comes after the Gemara saying, "Kol Yisrael shir l'chalak mahaba." Every Jew has a share in the world to come, with the exception of some really far out there. So even if a Jew has to go through suffering like that, God forbid, nonetheless, share in the world to come. Okay, wonderful day, everybody.